So, welcome. Tonight, we aren't just looking at a book, we're stepping inside of one. We're going to experience a landmark collection of horror, not as a review, but as a journey, a descent into the shadows it casts. So, take a breath, let's begin. And that question, right there, posed at the very start of the book, that's what's going to guide us tonight. Why do we do it? Why do we willingly seek out fear? What is it about the terrifying, the macabre, the thing that just profoundly unsettles us, that pulls us in? That's what we're here to find out. So, to even begin to answer that, we've got to understand the nature of this collection. We'll start our descent by exploring the book itself, because this thing is a true landmark anthology that really redefined the boundaries of horror. Okay, so what exactly are we talking about here? This is Dark Voices, a collection from 1992 edited by the one and only Stephen Jones. It gathers the absolute best stories from the iconic Pan Book of Horror series. Now, this is not your classic gothic horror with creaky castles and ghosts in chains. For decades, the series specialized in a different kind of dread. It argued that the most powerful terror isn't found way out there in some haunted mansion, but right here, in our world, the one we think we know so well. And that's the real trick, isn't it? That's exactly where the best of these stories start. They don't just throw a monster at you from page one. No, they begin in places we recognize, with people who could be our neighbors. They lull you into this false sense of security, building a world that's so incredibly normal that you just let your guard down. All right, let's take a character from one of the most chilling stories in the book. Picture this, a man who's a pillar of his community. He's a good family man, lives in a nice house with a perfectly kept garden. On the surface, he's the very picture of normal suburban life. His entire life is defined by this meticulous, almost unnerving sense of control. He drives carefully, he always observes the speed limit, he makes absolutely sure his car is centered perfectly between the parking lines. This is a man who follows all the rules. As he walks to his post at work, people greet him, and he greets them right back with this pleasant, totally reassuring smile. We see this rhythm, this placid, ordinary, everyday routine. A routine that is about to be completely and utterly shattered. And this is what makes it so brilliant. The horror doesn't begin with a scream, it begins with a whisper. The first tiny crack appears in this mundane facade, and it's so small you could almost miss it. See, before starting his shift, the man makes a quick stop. He buys baby rattles and pacifiers. Seems innocent enough, right? I mean, maybe he knows someone who just had a baby. But the story is titled Baby's Blood. And all of a sudden, this simple act feels deeply, deeply wrong. What could this pleasant, ordinary man possibly need these for? And then, the reveal. He arrives at his post, under that sign, and smiles warmly at the waiting mothers. The horror here isn't a monster hiding in the closet. It's the violation of a sacred trust. It completely weaponizes our assumption that the familiar is safe, turning a symbol of care into a source of absolute dread. But that horror, the horror of the mundane, that's just scratching the surface. From here, the collection just escalates, pulling us deeper and deeper into entirely different dimensions of terror. Each one is designed to find a new, dark corner of our psyche to poke at. First, we confront the horror of the inanimate. In Stephen King's story, The Mangler, an industrial laundry press becomes possessed after a series of, let's just say, bizarre accidents. The inspector who's investigating it feels this deep, unnatural wrongness coming from the machine itself. You know that feeling? It hits that primal fear that the world we've built to serve us could suddenly develop a will of its own. It's the terror of losing control, the fear that the cold, indifferent logic of our own creations could turn malevolent and decide we're in the way. Then, the anthology pivots. It dives right into body horror. In George Langeland's absolute classic, The Fly, a scientist's teleportation experiment goes horribly wrong when his atoms get fused with those of a common housefly. The result is, well, it's a grotesque, nightmarish hybrid. And this just perfectly captures the fear of losing our very identity, doesn't it? It's the terror that the self is fragile, that our own bodies, the one thing we feel like we actually own, can betray us, twist, and transform into something we don't even recognize, something monstrous. And finally, the book explores the horror of societal collapse. In a story called Ringing the Changes, a couple arrives in a quiet little seaside town just as every single church bell starts to ring, and a man runs through the streets, shouting not in fear, but with absolute joy. But here's the twist. This isn't your typical zombie apocalypse. The town isn't terrified, they're celebrating. It turns out it's an annual festival where their dead loved ones rise from their graves to rejoin them for a little while. The horror here is being the only sane person in a world that's gone completely mad, where the fundamental laws of reality have been turned completely upside down. You know, the true power of these stories isn't in the jump scare or that final shocking twist. It's in the echo they leave behind. It's that quiet dread that follows you after you put the book down. The questions that just linger in the dark. And when it comes to the craft of the book, horror legend Clive Barker really nailed it in his feedback. He said that it's the style, the elegance of the writing itself, that makes the terror so incredibly effective. The beautiful prose doesn't soften the horrifying ideas. It makes them more potent, more memorable. And that really is the ultimate takeaway. For its masterful craft and its deep, profound understanding of what truly scares us, we are giving this collection a 9 out of 10. These stories, they're not just escapist fiction. They are a distorted mirror held up to our own world, showing us all the unsettling possibilities just waiting for one little thing to go wrong. Which leaves you with a question, doesn't it? After seeing the ordinary turn monstrous, the familiar become alien, how certain are you really? Look around. At your coworkers, your neighbors, the technology sitting right there in your home. How sure are you that everything is exactly as it should be? So if you felt that chill and you want to explore it further, if you want to continue this journey into beautifully crafted fear, we've got 2 more collections for you that tread a very similar, unsettling path. First, Clive Barker's Books of Blood. It's an absolute masterclass in visceral, imaginative horror that completely redefined the genre back in the 80s. And then there's Stephen King's Night Shift. It's a foundational collection that, a lot like Dark Voices, finds its deepest terrors in the everyday world of factories and forgotten small towns. The Dark is full of stories. If you want to keep exploring them with us, make sure to follow and subscribe for more deep dives into the narratives that both define and disturb our world. Thank you for listening. Sleep well.